as I mentioned before, basically it is using the Hegelian dialectic. You establish one side, then you establish the other side, then you bring them into conflict, then you manage that conflict. So you establish Soviet Union, you establish Hitler, you bring them into conflict, World War II. By managing the conflict, you can control the next decade or so. And as I mentioned, we built up the Soviet Union. We're building up that China today, communist China. We're even going to send the military technology. So by 1990, 2000, we've established the two sides. We bring them into conflict.
And tell me.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher, and guys, you know I come back with that second video just to make you think. Now, you know Anthony Sutton. Basically, I've spoken about him 100 times, done 100 videos. Please go check those out. He had already told us what the New World Order was about to do. They were funding China the whole time, and now they're going to bring the two sides together. Of course, it's the Hegelian dialectic. And guys, also basically I'm going to have a video about the robots, the AI, the automation, because basically it's definitely coming. Basically, of course, I'm an older man. I had a robot in the early 80s that could bring you your food, talk to you. So this was the early 80s. So just imagine, we're talking about almost 40 years later, the type of robots that they have now. So guys, we definitely have to get our family educated. I know sometimes it's hard, but we need each other. But y'all enjoy the video.
This series, which I'm bringing out, takes two wars and one revolution. Well, two revolutions in one war. World War II, the Bolshevik Revolution, and the rise of Hitler, which I call a revolution in Germany. We can find the order behind the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. We can find behind the rise of Hitler. We can find in the maintenance of both of these systems, the transfer of technology to both.
Since you've already proven that Wall Street is behind the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of Hitler, now you're proving that the order is behind Wall Street.
Exactly.
Now, who's the key figure in the order or figures that mold Wall Street?
In order of dominance, Averell Harriman, partner in Brown Brothers Harriman. Stanley of Morgan Stanley. It used to be J.P. Morgan, then it became Morgan Stanley. Those two are the key.
Now, what did the order want to accomplish in the Bolshevik Revolution?
You create opposing forces which you place in conflict. Out of conflict, you've got profit, you've got political power, and you can direct history. And if you look at the writings, for example, of the Trilateral Commission, they talk openly in the Trilateral Commission about managing conflict, not solving conflicts, but managing conflicts. Conflict management, that's the cry.
So they got the profit, the power, and the management. Mm-hmm. Where do they want to steer history through the Bolshevik Revolution?
They wanted to set up, and they did, two opposing forces. Out of that came World War II. There were logical steps in the process. They used the same bank, Guarantee Trust Company, as the conduit for the financing of Hitler, and also as a conduit for financing, and also the early days of the Russian Revolution. In fact, in Russia, Soviet Russia in 1923, a vice president of Guarantee Trust Company was the foreign director of the Roscombank, which was the first Soviet overseas bank that was set up. They were that close in those days. You'll get a very close relationship between the early Hitler days and members of the order, which is in the third. I think the order has been at war with the United States in general since 1833. Problems. They cannot live with the Bill of Rights. In fact, this is why when Archibald MacLeish, a member of the order, wrote the Constitution for UNESCO, it was built into there that UNESCO would gradually try to erode press freedoms. In the Trilateral Commission, you'll find the same criticism, too much freedom of the press. There's just too much freedom for these people. They can't live with the Constitution. They tried to change the Constitution through the Fund for the Republic down here in Santa Barbara. They've not been successful yet, but they realize that there are roadblocks they've got to overcome to achieve what they want.
And today you will find people agreeing with the limitation of freedom in various sectors of this country for various purposes.
I think that's a very unfortunate part of our society, that too many people are willing to abandon freedom for security, or what they see as security. You can get security in a Siberian gulag, but you can get freedom in Hitler's concentration camp. But too many people are willing to give up freedom for security. Too many people are willing to look at these people as miniature gods. And because they have achieved power, don't ask how did they get power or what they're going to do with the power, but just the fact that they have power makes them a god, and therefore they worship them. This to me is unbelievable. People, I put in one of my books, we've got 20, 30 million degree holders in the United States, people who've earned a college degree, but they don't question statements which are made by these people.
There's the software, and then there's the people.
Willa Garage was this really kind of strange place, just strange enough to be able to bring the community together.
It was to make robotics better as fast as possible.
The results we got were because it was open source, it was a really good idea, it was the right value proposition for those grad students, and they told their friends, and it just spread through the entire robotics community.
So next thing you knew, we had a huge project that half the world was using to do robotics.
We were working on trying to make robotics happen as an industry, so moving it out of just research labs and into the real world. That was our goal. And one of the great things that came out of it was a robot operating system.
So this started for me when I was starting my PhD program with my partner in crime in this, Eric Berger. Now, we studied a bunch of things going on in robotics. At the time, you've talked to Brian Gerke, right? So at the time, there was a platform called Player Stage, which was a very successful open source project in robotics, in basically like robots that drive around. So we talked to everybody using that. We're like, why isn't this used in more advanced robotics? And that's when we got this message of like, look, nobody's even close to standardizing how this system should work.
So for a long time in robotics, it had been the case that you would get your hands on a robot, and then you would write a whole bunch of what we would call infrastructure, software to go with it. And that was just to make the robot vaguely work. Then after that, you could do what you actually wanted to do, which was to do an experiment, solve a problem, test a hypothesis. And the goal with ROS was to make it so that we took care of all that.
ROS is what makes it possible for body parts of the robot to talk to other body parts, and for humans to filter through all of those messages that come spewing out of the machine, picking out the ones that we care about and using that to build applications on top of. That's how I think of it.
Software has to combine together, and if you want to do a big multi-person effort, you have to have a framework for that. ROS was that framework.
What it means is that if you want to develop a new robot, you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to do the fundamental, sensors talking to computers. You don't have to do the fundamental navigation. You don't have to do the fundamental perception. That's all built into ROS.
That notion, that core idea that I can use ROS and take my piece of this, but combine it with everybody else's best of breed stuff, that's a really powerful idea, and that idea spread like wildfire.
They really started to cement this idea in a strong way that you can have platforms that are beyond just a standalone ARM or a standalone mobile base. You can have a very complex standard platform that has all of this capability. And I think giving away the first 11 PR2s had a big impact in that way.
PR2 is a robot designed from the ground up to enable software developers to focus on new ideas and new technology. The PR2 stands for Personal Robot 2.
It was a combination of like the sci-fi idea of a robot and the reality of what is required to make a robot that can do all of the things that you want a robot to do.
I think of the PR2 as really a research platform for trying out ideas and prototyping, but no one wants that thing in their house. Like, it will destroy your carpets, first of all, and freak out your dog. The PR2 was not the point. It was practice for Ross.
This week, doing the normal things, working out a few new processes with the Ross 2 Technical Steering Committee.
My memory recalls I believe it was a Friday afternoon, might have been happy hour, sitting outside of Willow Garage, and Brian proposed this idea to me about splitting off to form the Open Source Robotics Foundation.
And that's really the point where we took responsibility for Ross.
They took up the gauntlet, right? They kept the RossCon conferences going. They've kept the community growing.
And that's really accelerating not just robotics research, but robotics industries everywhere.
One of the robots behind me, we created in 5 months from scratch, like hardware, software, everything. It was running and it was riding on elevators, right? How do you do that fast? The answer is Ross, right? There's no way we could have done it without that.
I mean, Ross really transformed everything.
It was changing a culture that was very insulated to a culture of how do we make things reproducible.
The community would not be at the size it is, and people would not be having the commercial impact they're having, certainly if we had gone a different way with how we licensed it.
And then without that one common platform that everybody's building on and contributing to and enabling people to build on each other, without that common platform that brings the community together, robotics would definitely not be where it is today.